One of the lessons and topics I want to encourage leaders in is not falling for the fallacy of being cool. Cool and calling are always conflicting. Now, there's nothing wrong if someone was born with a certain type of, let's say, appeal that attracts people because that is how God has created them. However, there is something wrong if we try to manufacture this type of appeal to attract people because it begins our work, not only in our life, but in their lives with a double dose of deceit. In the first dose, we are superficially trying to get them to value us for who we have been called to be by presenting ourselves as someone we're not. In the second dose of deceit, we are giving them someone they are comfortable with or someone they think is cool, but not the leader who will lead them on the uncomfortable, caring, and wise journey of growth. There's a danger to this idea of manufactured appeal. I think Caitlin Beatty dives into this in this type of deceit in her book Celebrities for Jesus when she quotes, "It's the power of the one shot, that face-filling frame, the close mic, the voice drop to a lover's whisper, the memoir, the disclosures that had never been discussed with the author's pastor, parents, or sometimes even lover or spouse before they were published, the tweet, the selfie, the Insta, the snap. All of it gives us the ability to seem to know someone without, in fact, knowing much about them at all. Since in the end, we know only what they and the systems of power that grow up around them choose for us to know. We think we know our favorite ministry heads, worship leaders, authors, activists, and evangelists because we follow them on social media or hear them preach from a stage or read their words on a page. We are engaging with the presented mediated self. And the absence of true knowledge and true accountability leaves abundant opportunity for their social power to be misused and abused. To have immense social power in little proximity is a spiritually dangerous place for any of us to be. She continues, this is true not just for individuals, but for entire movements. If recent headlines, evangelical consumerism, and she says this, and even her own upbringing are any indication, the American church has overall mimicked celebrity culture rather than challenged it. We have too many institutions built around personalities, people with immense social power, but little or no proximity. Proximity to what? Real people and real things. We're well past the point of thinking of celebrity as a neutral tool. End quote. Scripture calls us away from this kind of deceitful image to authentic identity. Romans 12, 1-2 reminds us that, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Many times when we see this passage, we automatically think sexual immorality. However, a study of this word soma, which is the body, reveals it can mean a body in a physical sense, a body in a figurative sense, a body in a spiritual sense, or the body of the church. It has a vast meaning. But what it is really trying to get at is the way that we live in our bodies, the way that we treat our bodies, where we take our bodies, and how we exist in our bodies is all worship. And to recognize where we are in our thought process or our actions in the use of our bodies is a barometer for where our worship is. So when we get into this conversation of this body, we realize that our identity is lived in this body. Or we start to create something else that we want to present as if it lives in our body, and that is image. And there are ethics that we need to follow when we are working through image versus identity. One of the areas that we seriously overlook with Romans 12, 1-2 is this ethic of image. Image in the dictionary is defined as a representation of the external form of a person or thing in art, or the general impression that a person, organization, or product, watch this, presents to the public. In other words, our image is what we portray to the public, hoping that they will buy it within the manner that we are selling. The transaction of them buying our image will equate to them giving us value in the market of humanity's opinions, awards, hierarchy, and class or caste systems. Image is us presenting our bodies to the world. When Romans 12, 1-2 tells us that we only should present our bodies to one person, and that one person is God. And our bodies should be presented in the form of a living and holy sacrifice. And when we sacrifice our bodies to God as living and holy unto Him, what we discover is that identity is not image. They are actually totally different. Identity is what God has given us. Image is what we have either let ourselves or the opinions of others force us to manufacture. God gives us a call to transformation in Romans 12, 1-2, and not conformity. Romans 12:2 then calls us not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. The word conformed in this text in the original language literally is defined as to fashion oneself according to. Another way of saying it is, do not fashion oneself according to the world. Do not make one's image or identity fashion itself unto the world. Any of us who are trying to create, construct, or abduct this essence of coolness that we were not born with, or that we do not participate in with safe inspiration, will find themselves within the process of conforming to the world. Inspiration should enhance who you already are. It should assist in the transformation of who God wants you to be, or help you find vehicles to naturally express the way that God already created you. Inspiration should not make you something that you've never been before, or make you something that you've decided to become in searching for significance or battling that scary fight with insignificance. Thus, this text tells us that trying to be cool and creating an image for ourselves outside of our identity is conformity to the world. So what do we do next? We renew our minds beyond surface level transformation. Conformity is what God does not want for us or from us, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds is what God wants for and from us. Once again, the same mistake that we've made with the word body when reading Romans 12, 1-2 is the same mistake that we make with this phrase of being transformed by the renewing of our mind. We know what it means to have our minds transformed about outward sin, about idols, and all of these other things, sexual immorality. But do we slow down enough to be transformed in the renewing of our minds when it comes to how we think about our identities and how we authentically or inauthentically show up in the world? Do we ever take a deep breath in prayer and ask God, why did you make me like this? I don't get it. Do we ask God questions like, where is my unique place in the world? Do we grapple with how living in a manufactured image is easier than living in a created identity? Do we have the hard conversation with God about why we are to figure out who we are and what we are here for? No. What we do at most times is give in to the temptation to be cool. And I get it. At times we all want to be cool, and this may sound juvenile, but you would be surprised how many adults struggle with this. We all want to be cool and have a certain type of swagger or have an effect on someone with our personality or our aesthetic. Being cool is not the real concern because God has made all of us cool in our own certain ways. But the truth is we want to be more image cool than identity cool. Why is that? One of the reasons I am heavily considering is because we have fallen for the bait and switch, believing that cool is synonymous with significant. We've inherited the notion that significance is determined by how people react to us. But the reactions of the masses has never been the marker of true significance. The results of what we have done and the lives that we have changed by being ourselves is the only true marker of significance, and it is the only thing that has ever outlasted the fanfare or trends in celebrity social statuses. Significance in the scriptures we read is made cool because it is effective, not because it's entertaining, not because it's always celebrated and welcomed by culture, but because it is always celebrated and welcomed by heaven, the kingdom, and its king. And we rarely see it be popular amongst the masses. We have so many biblical examples of uncool leaders. Most people that God has used were, like my guy Dante Ben would say, outcasts, divergents, and black sheep. Joseph was sold into slavery. David was left amongst the sheep and was not welcome in the war. Gideon was a coward at best. John the Baptist was so weird that he secluded himself in the wilderness while everybody talked about how weird he was. Paul was frowned upon by these so-called super apostles and walked around with people frowning upon his physical stature and identity. Jesus was crucified in concert in exchange for Barabbas. And we can go on and on. And with all these examples pointing away from this philosophy of worldly image-based coolness, we still find ourselves attempting to be cool. Why? Because we are too insecurely arrogant to be convinced that we are not cool. We're too scared to live with the truth of what it means to show up knowing that we aren't cool in the way the world accepts. And we're too foolish to live with the pleasure and the privilege that the master didn't make us for the masses. He made us for himself. He and only he is the only applause we should live for, the only judgment we should be scared of, the only friendship we find eternity in, and the only approval that matters at the end. So how do we get out of this destructive image bearing of coolness and move into this identity that God has given us? Well, first, we need to seek friendship in spite of vocation. Caitlin Beatty, in her book, Celebrities for Jesus, gives us what she believes is the antidote to this celebrity leader and follow culture in this image-based existence of trying to be cool. She says, quote, "I was struck by the simplicity of what Crouch told me. Friendship. None of us need another fan. We all need another friend. We're meant to have people in our lives who are so close to us that nothing can impress them and nothing can shock them," he told me in our interview. This is another description of proximity, the antidote to celebrities' isolating effects. Proximity happens when we are fully known and fully loved, which is the thing all of us, celebrity or not, are made for, end quote. Friendship in spite of vocation is simply about being friends with people who are not impressed with what I do and don't care about what I do. They care about my identity and who I am more than my image that stems from what I do or do not do. This doesn't mean that they don't celebrate the value of what we contribute to the world. This means that they celebrate the value and move on, because they know that God has created so much more in me and for me to enjoy other than my work. This means they also can see how my strengths and my weaknesses are etched in who God has made me or how the fall has broken me. And if they are good friends, no matter how much I will be offended, they offer me the advice, the critique, and love to become better. Notice I said these need to be friends in spite of vocation and not friends within the same vocation. Relationship, personality, in this friendship type of intimacy should be the only thing you and these friends share in common. Very few people can be true friends to a person when they work in the same industry or organization. Why? Because we never really show all of ourselves to people we work with or people that we compete with in these spaces. Proverbs 17:17 states that a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. Will someone in a mere work relationship be able to do this for you? Will someone who just shares your industry in common be able to do this for you? And I think who makes this mistake more than anybody are pastors, because pastors live by this ideology, believing that the only people who can be friends to them are other pastors. That is totally unbiblical and has led to some of the worst accountability that we have seen in any vocation. A pastor is not all of who you are. It is merely what you do. Yes, you can have friends that support you, understand you, and walk with you in the pastorate because they are pastors. But what about all the other parts of life where the vocation of your pastorate should be invisible and the identity of who you are outside of the pastorate should be on center stage? The second thing that we need to do to beat this wrong construction of image in this ideology of image-driven leadership in ministry is we need to have accountability in spite of reputation. You need people in all areas of your life to hold you accountable to the standard of who God wants you to be, and not the standard of what people believe your reputation is, which is simply who people think you are in the image that you present or the ambitions you have, but you really aren't any of those. The biggest question someone holding you accountable can ask you is, what's underneath all of that? Hey, I see you've been engaging with social media more. Can you tell me what's underneath all of that? Hey, I see you've been changing your vernacular and how you speak and what words you use. It seems to be a little unnatural, but I could be wrong. Can you tell me what's underneath all of that? Hey, I see you've become a sneakerhead recently. That wasn't you before. I don't mind new hobbies, but can you tell me what's underneath all of that? Accountability relationships should be relationships with people who love you for who you are and continuously get you to stare into your soul for the sake of seeing yourself through the lens of Jesus, seeing yourself with an understanding of who you are, and seeing yourself and what you contribute to the world clearly. They know who you are at the core. They know who you are in your true identity, and not just who you are in culture or what culture regards you to be because of your vocation or your falsely constructed image. Your reputation only matters to them in one area. What is your reputation unto God and the core values that you have set for yourself? It only matters if you're in a healthy space with life or if there's some indicators pointing to unhealthiness. Remember, accountability is a core part of how Jesus has designed friendship. Proverbs 27:5-6 tells us an open rebuke is better than hidden love. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. The third thing that we need is the lordship of the hidden word in spite of the masses' proclamation. For a while, the main currency of our culture has been fame and clout. People will do everything from flattering you to enabling you to get you to a place of clout that is big enough for them to share in the spotlight. It's a true statement when it was said that you are never as good as they say you are, and you are never as bad as they say you are, but you are somewhere in the middle and need to live in that tension. What matters is not that you hear the good or the bad opinions from anyone and automatically begin to celebrate or diagnose yourself. The proper action is to listen closely enough to both the celebration and critique to see if they are echoing God in anything he has said or is saying to you, and to listen for how God is telling you to approach the celebration or critique as a whole. The problem with our broken identities that we tried to mold into image is that we allow ourselves and other people to do the shaping similar to what Aaron did for the Israelites with the golden calf. When all we have to do, if we really want to walk in true identity, is allow the Lord to shape us by his sovereignty, his perfect will, and his word. Romans 9:20-21 says, on the contrary, who are you, you foolish person, who answers back to God? The thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this, will it? Or does the potter not have a right over the clay to make from the same lump one object for honorable use and another for common use? Acts 17:24-28 states, the God who made the world and everything that is in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made by hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything. Since he himself, watch this, gives to all people life and breath and all things, including their identity and their place in the world. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might feel around for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him, watch this, we live and move and exist. God has sovereignty over creating us, shaping us, forming us, giving us purpose, putting us in places of purpose, and in charge of how we carry out our life in doing his will. In the Acts passage, it says that he has appointed times and the boundaries of our habitation, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might feel around for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and exist. One of the ways that we seek God and we find God in the midst of our being and how we live and move and exist is we understand the identity that he has created us in, and we do not exchange this identity for an image that is welcome more by people, but does not have the creation of God existing within it. Caitlin Beatty sums it up, and I agree with her. What we need more than anything when we are battling between image and identity is we need friends that affirm our identity, and we don't need friends and fans that affirm our image. So then, what is the ultimate friendship? The greatest friend that any of us could have is Jesus. Jesus has called us to find life in his word, his statutes, and his commands. We find identity where we find true life, and we find true life where we find Jesus. And where we find Jesus, we find his word. And if we remain in him as the word, we then find the ultimate friendship with Jesus that is needed to battle our desire for celebrity or significance through a sinfully crafted image and not identity. In Matthew 15:12-21, Jesus says, this is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that a person will lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you to do. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, because all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give to you. Let me pause right there. Do you realize what Jesus is saying there? He's saying, you're my friends if you do what I command you. A part of what Jesus commands us to do is live in the identity that he has sovereignly created for us, and to do the things that he has assigned us to do. How do we know that? We see it further down in the verse. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit. and that your fruit would remain. Oh my God, do you see that terminology? Do you see that terminology? I've appointed you that you would go and bear fruit. You see, usually when we read this passage separated from the premise that whenever we embody the purpose of God, we are not only doing activity, but we need to make sure that we're in the right identity. Jesus says, I appointed you. You meaning the way I designed you, the gifts that I gave you, the essence that I put in you. The charisma and whichever way that it shows up is what I've given you. Why? Because everything I've packaged you with is what I am sending you with to go and bear fruit. And the reason that I am doing it in that way, because where I send you to go and bear fruit, the gifting that I've given you, the personality that I've given you, the appeal that I've given you, the understanding that I've given you, it's going to situate you in that place and give you staying power. Why? So your fruit would remain. Some of us are out here and our fruit is not remaining because we've switched up from living in our identity to living in an image. And we see this so-called fruit that we're getting from this image-based ministry and this image-based relationship. And if we had friends who were outside of whatever we were doing and who would tell us the truth about who we are, they would say, you know what? God is saying what you did back there has remained and has more of a legacy and more results and more fruit than what you're doing here. Have you changed anything in your formula? I seriously believe that one of the reasons that we are so hard to love at times, and one of the reasons why we cannot love one another the way that we are supposed to be loving one another, is not because we are not trying to love one another, but I never get to see who you really are because you are tucked underneath an image. That this person that you present yourself with, these trials that you're struggling with, these questions that you're asking about life, they're not questions that are etched in your true identity. They're questions that are etched because you are trying to pull off this act of image. But listen to what Jesus continues to say after this. If the world hates you, you know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, because of this, the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you. A slave is no greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you as well. If they follow my word, they will follow yours also. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know the one who sent me. We have a big problem with this. Many of us will not admit this, but in our approach to living in what we consider to be authentic Christianity, we want to live as close as we possibly can to being accepted by the world, because when we took up the cross of Christianity, they kicked us out of the world, and we don't like feeling insignificant or not useful when it comes to the world. And so we build this identity of being Christians that are relevant to the world, that are trying to inspire the world. But what we're really doing is trying to ask ourselves, is there any way I can conform to being like the world and have Jesus too? Jesus says, the world is treating you like you are their friend. The world is treating you like you are okay and common to them. The world is treating you like you belong to it. It's not my words. It's Jesus's. He was very clear on this. He says, but because the world hated me, if you look like me, then the world is automatically going to hate you too. I hate when this happens because this has been so traumatic to individuals that have shared this story with me. But I've had individuals share a story with me and they said, you know, my mom and my dad never really got along, or they got a divorce. And because of the hatred that my mom had for my father or my father had for my mother, because I looked like the parent they hated, when they got mad at me, they would say stuff like, I can't stand you because you look just like that person. And Jesus is saying to us, I don't want you to happen to you in your real life. I want your mother and your father to see that you have the imago Dei in you, that I created you in my image. But I do want that to happen when it's between you and the world. I want them to say to you, I can't stand you because you look just like him. I want them to say to you, you resemble that God that I have a problem with right now. And since you look so much like him, I'm going to hate you the same way that I hated him. But what is happening in our faith so often, because we are trying to create these images like we are cool to the world somehow loves us and hates Jesus. One of us cats ain't playing right. I'll let you tell it. How does the world love your representation of Jesus but hate Jesus at the same time? How does the world love your makeup of Jesus but hate the real Jesus in the Bible at the same time? How do they love the image that you are putting forth about what church is and who Jesus is, but actually hate the God who the image is supposed to portray at the same time? Jesus is saying, there's something wrong there. He says, but all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know the one who sent me. They are absent of understanding who God is. Jesus says, you are my friends if you do what I command you. So what has Jesus commanded us to do when it comes to how we function, we live, we exist in, we value, and we show up authentically in our identity? What has Jesus commanded you about how you show up in the world? I'm not talking about a general commanded you as in commanded all of us together. I'm talking about individually you. What has Jesus said to you about how you show up in the world? When you sit down with him and you say, you know what, Jesus, I'm thinking about pulling up like this. Does he say, man, I'm with that because that's who I created you to be. That's who I created you to be. You right on point. Or when you say, Jesus, you know what? I'm thinking about pulling up like this. I'm thinking about showing myself in the world like this. Does he say, who is that? I don't know that person. I didn't create that individual that you're trying to be. Who are you again? Which one does Jesus say to you? What has Jesus commanded you about the destructive construction of an image versus living in your authentic identity? Pastor or leader, believers in Jesus, whatever part of the body you find yourself in, what has Jesus commanded you about the desire to be cool for the sake of acceptance? What he has commanded all of us is to see him as preeminent and to remember that you were ultimately created for him and his will, and that he was crucified and died for you to walk in your identity, washed by his blood, loved by the Father. So in conclusion, beloved pastors and leaders, we see so much value in you being true in your own identity. But we also see so many reckless attempts by you to secure value by constructing an image. My sincere and loving prayer for you, for me, any of us that struggle with putting image over identity, is simply found in the words of Colossians 1:16 through 23. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created, watch this, through him and for him. He is before all things, And in him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything. That includes who you show up for in your identity. That includes that you put him in first place. When you are thinking about, should I go for image or identity? You go for identity because it pleases Jesus, for it was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, and through him reconcile all things to himself. Whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. And although you were previously alienated and hostile in attitude, engaged in evil deeds, yet he has now reconciled you in his body of flesh through death in order to do what? In order to do what? To present you before himself, holy and blameless, beyond reproach, if indeed you continue in the faith, firmly established and steadfast, and not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, which was proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, was made a minister. If we continue in the faith, firmly established and steadfast, if you are going to continue in the faith firmly established and steadfast, you need to be firmly established and steadfast in the identity that he has for you. And not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you have heard. If you are going to not shift from the hope of the gospel, you have to be steadfast in the identity that he gave to you, and saying that I am more than enough because Jesus spilled his blood for me and he saved me and he made me to be this person that is going to go out and bear fruit. I have a place in the Great Commission just as he created me, and not how I have to manufacture myself. Which I, Paul, was made a minister. One of the biggest things that we love about Paul's ministry is that we see Paul in his authentic identity. Not only the things that he does well, but the things that he fought and struggled with. We've seen Paul fight with God about his identity, about his ailments, about the body that God gave him, is what some people assume that passage is about. He asks God 3 times, will you remove this thorn? And what does God say to him? My grace is sufficient for you in how I created you, and what I bring to you, and how I form you, and what trials I will allow to come into your life, and what ailments that I have given you, whatever I have given you, it is enough to get you where you need to go. Why? Because the grace that I have for you is sufficient. Pastor, leader, beloved pastor, beloved leader. We see so much value in you, but we also see the reckless attempts that you have participated in to manufacture a destructive image for yourself that you think will get you more significance in this world than what God created you to be. But in love and accountability, and hope that we get to experience more from you and your created identity, we just want to remind you that you were created for him. And if you do what you do in being created for him, then you will be affected for us, but you were not created for us. You were created for him. You were created for him. You were not created for yourself to enjoy and be happy about every single thing about you. There are going to be some things about you that you do not understand, some things about you that you do not like, some things about you that are going to keep you out of places that you think you want to go. But this is what you need to remember. You were not created for you. You were created for him. And you were not created for consumption. You were created for worship. You were created for service. You were created to give him glory. So I ask you, please stop trying to be cool, because in your image, you are not. In your identity, you are cool in the way that God crafted you to be cool. Be that, because that is the way he receives worship from your existence, in the way that we receive value from your service. Stop trying to be cool in the way that you are manufacturing yourself through image, because we hate to tell you, but we must tell you in love, when you show up that way, you are not. You are not cool. You are not effective. You are still valued because we love you, but we know that God has so much more for you, and we will love you and walk with you until you get to being in that place where you are fully comfortable in your identity. And it's okay. It's okay to be you. God bless you. We'll see you on the next episode of Intention.